Good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly been an interesting year for us, I think, between acquisitions and rights offers and boycotts here and there, but keeps us all on the go. So I'm going to very quickly try and take you through a few kind of key focus areas for us. Just touching on some of our kind of key figures for the year and where things have improved or where we've had challenges as well. A little bit, I think, also about one of our big focus areas at the moment, which is really shifting from a South African kind of focus to much more of a Woolworths Holdings group approach, given what's happened in the last year for us. A bit about our business case in general, and then I think also just to hone in on one particular area, which is water in this case, and to talk about some of the work we're doing there and how it affects so much or so many different parts of our business. So I think what we've tried to ask ourselves over this year is, what does it take to be a Southern Hemisphere leader? And that's really looking at ourselves very differently in terms of the scale we have, the influence we have, and the opportunities we have across the hemisphere as well. How we can compete against Northern Hemisphere, particularly textile companies coming into Southern Africa, into Australia, etc. And then also within that scope, what does that mean for our African expansion, for our expansion of our foods business in South Africa, and our kind of sourcing opportunities from a clothing perspective internationally. So what we've really put down is 8 key focus areas for our business as a whole. And I think intuitively that should make a fair amount of sense or be pretty simple. You'll see, I think, from my perspective, what I'm obviously happy about is that embedding sustainability or our good business journey is one of those key group focus areas. And that obviously makes life easier for every conversation that we need to have across the group as well. I think more importantly as well, this driving synergies and efficiencies is maybe not something that a lot of companies would kind of put up there. It would be a lot more of a background issue, but it's a massive opportunity for us at the moment in terms of our group expansion process. Then just to match, we've also looked at identifying 8 key focus areas for our sustainability program. We've got a number of different targets, over 200 across all the different business units for our whole sustainability plan. And we kind of re-looked at the targets and the focuses during the course of this year through to 2020, thinking we're going to prioritize and really focus a lot better. Instead, we went from 6 to 8 focus areas, so I think we kind of went a bit wrong across there. But I suppose just the nature of a changing business for us as well. So really ethical trade, and what we mean by that is understanding what goes on in the supply chains for our food and clothing business and the significant risk that I'm going to touch on in a moment around that. Sustainable farming and sourcing of raw materials, water and energy and waste, I think fairly obvious for almost any one of the South African companies we'd see here today. Contributing to social development and transformation. And then I think really interestingly, and what's come through incredibly strongly from a customer perspective for us, is the issue of health and wellness. And though we are not a Netcare or something like that, the kind of focus from a customer side and the potential impact on our employees, our customers, etc., and health and wellness issues has really kind of promoted that back to one of our central focus areas as well. So as I said, we've got all these different focus areas around the business. What's helping from an integration perspective is kind of 2 different things. One, that sustainability is one of our values, so there's a cultural element to all of this, which makes it a lot easier to drive support across the business. Aligned with that, we also have the integration into balanced scorecards, so a little bit of, I guess, carrot and stick. And that's really helped us make sure that every one of the business units takes real accountability of their targets or their scorecards as well. We review and measure those twice a year, and then look at new opportunities for innovation across those different targets with the business units. Just taking a step back and looking again at our investment case, and I think we've had more and more in sustainability involvement across all of these different areas. Obviously, from a customer perspective, our target market has been a lot more, I won't say immune, but a bit more resilient to some of the different challenges we've seen in South Africa. And I think we're continuing to see it's going to be a tough few years ahead for customers as well. But in our kind of target base, there's a little bit more of an appetite in both the food and clothing space. Similarly in Australia as well. I think we've seen really good success as well with our loyalty programs. 71% of our revenue in South Africa now tracked through our loyalty programs, and almost 85% in Country Road Group in Australia. So it's giving us really unique information about customer behavior and making us really be able to kind of gear particular offers and particular focus areas for customer groups and customer bands as well. I think our retail presence, we were kind of looking at a sort of expansion program for a number of years. That's slowed over the last 3 or 4 years, but it's really taken up again. The expansion of food stores, the expansion into Africa as well, and now also our expansion and kind of optimization process in Australia and New Zealand at the same time. We're up to 80 stores in Africa, and I think excitingly as well, we've really taken over ownership of the majority of those businesses, which is giving us a much bigger alignment opportunity. Also giving us an opportunity to take loyalty programs, financial service business and others into selected African countries and kind of grow our offering and make it much more of a consistent experience for customers across each of the different regions. From our operations and supply chain, we're at the moment investing in a new distribution centre for Country Road Group in Australia, which we see as an opportunity for David Jones also within that scope. And I think this kind of sourcing efficiency is really a big space for us going forward. We also, from an employee perspective, are getting really positive feedback about the focus around our employee value proposition. Our union membership levels have dropped year on year consistently over the last 5 or 6 years because I think employees are recognizing that we can help them grow and develop without the need for kind of union intervention necessarily. We've had a number of recognitions in terms of our skills development and recruitment processes as well. And I think our BEE scheme and other interventions has really helped grow that kind of culture and morale around employee issues as well. From a business resilience perspective, the kind of geographic hedge and also diversification of our business between food, clothing and financial services is really helping us around some of the risks we're seeing in the markets at the moment. With this acquisition, we're going to see about 45% of our group turnover coming from Australia and New Zealand. So a very significant difference, exchange rate hedge issues as well that help us here, and some big opportunities for us in terms of taking product and private label product from South Africa to Australia and vice versa as well. Our financial service business continues to be well managed as well. We've got one of the lowest impairment rates in the industry. And that partnership with ABSA, again, is bringing some real big opportunities. And I think there's still more work for us to do and more focus around bringing our loyalty and rewards programs closer with our financial services business as well. From a Country Road perspective, as I mentioned, the business has been doing really well in both Australia as well as in South Africa. And I think the kind of premium level offering that it's done has really found a niche in both markets. With the David Jones acquisition, there's some big opportunities for us. Expanding the Country Road offering within the David Jones stores, first of all, kind of switching private label brands around. But again, a lot of kind of promises we've made around synergies and optimization, so a lot of work to do in the next couple of years to realize the benefits of this acquisition as well. And I think then from a governance perspective, we feel like we've found a really strong kind of board direction, a good mix of skills as well. We're at the moment looking for an Australian kind of experienced individual to also join our board to kind of create an extra balance for us within this space. But good guidance from the board as well at the moment. Okay, so that's going to look really messy and quite loud to you. But I think it's illustrating some of the complexity for us and moving very much into the risk space where commodity and supply chain risk is one of the key issues for us as a business going forward. So whether we talk about social or environmental issues, our reputation as a retailer, much like the reputation of food and bev and textile companies, is intrinsically linked to what happens across our supply chain. And that's not so much just our direct suppliers anymore, but even suppliers of our suppliers and input suppliers into suppliers of our suppliers. At the end of the day, it's not going to be XYZ Foods who are going to be interrogated about this. It's going to be a Woolworths as well. So we've really had to put a lot more effort into understanding these supply chains, looking at responsible kind of group approaches around commodity sourcing, around textile sourcing as well, partnering with other corporates and with NGOs to try and look at some of the issues we face in this space. And that's both in South Africa and internationally. As I mentioned as well, I think really important to start asking our customers more and more about what their key risks and key concerns are over the next 5 years. And what came out of that for us was a number of different issues, obviously around cost of living and kind of concerns about commodity prices as well in South Africa. The health and wellness side and health and disease side was incredibly close to customers' hearts around what they feed their kids, around what the kind of longevity is of the lifestyles we live these days and the stress that's around it. Education, a big issue for customers as well. And then I think interestingly still, despite these risks, a very kind of wide lens of issues that they feel are important to South Africa, around water, around energy and climate change, and wanting to see businesses do the right thing in that space as well. So just a very quick update. one of our key integration mechanisms for the business was really to make sure that each of our products has got a sustainability attribute. And we're making very good progress in the food and the clothing space at the moment around that, well ahead of our targets for next year already. We're seeing that the majority of our kind of sourcing is within our sustainable farming guidelines, particularly through our Farming for the Future program, which is meeting all of our fresh produce suppliers, now into our secondary supply chain there as well, into the dairy space, into horticulture and wine, and having a really good impact on that space. I think the challenge for us, and I'll touch a bit on it later in the water case study, is now realizing that as much as we can do within our own supply chain, it doesn't help when you've got this kind of captive island and you've got a broader system that's having a major negative impact as well. So we've got to start looking beyond our own supply chain as well. Really interesting and I think good movements around some of the certification processes like fair trade, in the cocoa, the coffee, the palm oil space as well. We've joined the Better Cotton Initiative to also try and maximize what we can do around leveraging our clothing supply chain, and we're starting to see that translate into product coming into store as well. I think from a waste perspective, we've set ourselves zero waste to landfill targets, which I guess is well now impossible, but we're trying our very best to get there. We're at about 95% recycle and reuse out of all our distribution and head office facilities at the moment, and really looking at the last kind of opportunities we have in that space. But I think from a customer perspective, waste is really an issue that we interact a lot with. Customers are concerned about packaging, about how they can recycle, what are the simple things we can do around that. So we've done a lot of focus on using recycled material into our products and different packaging materials, to the part where we used about 12 million plastic bottles back into our packaging and products over the last year. And I think hopefully driving a market that creates more value for recycled materials across South Africa at the same time. I think really positively we're seeing big investments from two of our key suppliers into expansion of facilities around recycled materials, particularly in plastics, PET. Really driving recyclability, continuing to try and promote reusable bags and the community development stories behind them as a key offering to our customer base as well. And then I think using those bags as a vehicle to raise funds for other charity opportunities as well, both in the environmental and social space. And then well outside, I guess, our usual comfort zone, but really trying to partner with different organizations around recycling facilities. With the new legislation around waste in South Africa, I think the pressure on companies is only going to grow over the next couple of years. Potential for packaging taxes coming through. So best we get as involved as possible in creating an infrastructure that helps develop recycling as well. So we've got schools, engines, and selected stores recycling facilities at the moment, and some real collaboration that's required to deliver against those particular projects. From an energy perspective, this continues to be a major barrier to kind of cost increases for us. We've saved about 225 million rand over the last 4 years on energy costs through the different interventions we've put in place over time, whether it be around our green store model development, around our lighting and refrigeration programs and other efficiency as well. And we are now trying to take as much of that learning into our kind of store development process in Australia and in the rest of Africa as well, where energy prices are also quite a constraint in many cases. I think the other way to look at this as well is now moving to not just the cost management side, but also how we secure supply for ourselves. So that sort of self-sufficiency and not thinking about generators as the backup for us in many cases, but rather clean energy and other opportunities for our business as well. We're also looking at how we can drive our partnership with the Imperial Group to really push the logistics efficiency that our business is already known for, and continue to look at sustainability developments in that space. We had a session in the last week with Imperial and Transnet as well around what are the efficiencies and opportunities around rail in the next while. And though I think it's a long-term aim still for us, it's one of the things we've got to explore and got to keep driving towards as well. So despite, I think, the kind of challenge of some of the changes to the BE codes, we've maintained our status at level 3 for this year. The likelihood of maintaining that over the next year is much lower, but I think we've realized that there's a lot of work and a lot of opportunity provided by the new codes as well, so we've got to embrace those and work with our suppliers to achieve them. Our employee kind of Bezos scheme is now distributed about 243 million in dividends over the last year. It comes due in 2015, so we are looking at what the future is for that potential of the scheme as well. We've got 53 enterprise development programs at the moment that we're working with through our foods, clothing, and kind of support services business. But again, recognize that we've got to grow that all the time and develop new opportunities within our indirect and direct supply chain as well. I think one of the really kind of key stories and key examples for us from an enterprise development and a social development side is an organization called the Clothing Bank, though, where they've created jobs for over 1,000 unemployed women over the last 5 years through creating a kind of network for our surplus clothing and surplus clothing of other retailers, where young unemployed single mothers can sell that as their own business development programs, get the necessary mentoring programs, 2-year financial skills programs around it as well. And I think in recognition of that, the Clothing Banks had quite a big government grant as well, so they're going to expand from 3 sites to 9 over the next couple of years. So our responsibility into that is to try and increase the amount of kind of clothing going through that system, and as a result, we're also going to pilot recycling bins for customers to try and kind of push more and more into that space as well. And then I think from a social development perspective, what we've really tried to look at is this kind of depth and breadth of the different impacts we have. And our contribution over the last year was 518 million rand across the different interventions we have. I think we've got to be honest about that, and a massive, massive portion of that is what we actually do with our surplus food and clothing product. So that's not necessarily the most sustainable intervention. It's an important one, but we've also got to look at ways of really redefining that and making sure it's adding to a proper diet for people across the charities we work with, and creating real partnerships there as well. So from a cost-saving perspective, quickly, I mentioned the figures around energy, but I think we're starting to see really interesting projects developing across our business where people are given an opportunity to think differently around processes and products and to try and innovate and save costs and drive new processes as well. So whether it's in the waste management space, around e-statements in our financial services business, around energy, fuel savings, etc., we've seen some really, really good kind of momentum and about 270 million saved in the last few years off very low kind of capital investment in most cases as well. Quick update from a clothing side. And I've particularly honed in on this because I think it's not just Carla who kind of thinks of food first in many cases. A lot of our sustainability work started in our foods business, and I think a lot of our sustainability work really started in the foods business because people do have a really kind of passionate view on what they ingest, I guess. But our clothing business has been more of a challenge because of the kind of long-term and long-distance relationships in some cases. But I think we've seen really good traction over the last year, and a very kind of clear program, whether it be around ethical trade and kind of co-investing with suppliers to make sure that they're doing the right thing in terms of kind of minimum working hours, conditions, wages, etc., through to particular interventions in countries like Bangladesh, where we've co-funded kind of fire safety and building safety interventions around the issues that have happened in that textile sector. Sustainable cotton, kind of 3 main focuses: organic, better cotton, and switching as much of our sourcing to African cotton as possible as well over the last year. We've identified our denim business as a particularly good customer interaction engagement space as well, and really made our re-denim range a real sustainability kind of intervention for us, from energy and water saving to reducing chemicals, investing in new technologies, and also even using recycled materials like recycled plastic bottles back into the product range as well. Engaging with suppliers both in South Africa and internationally around kind of green factories and their community development as well. And then finally looking at how we can phase out any kind of hazardous chemicals from our whole clothing supply chain over the next 5 years. And we've got a very particular kind of time frame around that as well. So I think it's been exciting for us to sort of take the conversation from just sort of more of a foods-based one at a customer level to a clothing conversation as well. And that's really open engagement in different areas for us as well. So shifting on to a group kind of view on these different things. And I think the realization that we want to drive as much consistency as possible, but also allow for flexibility at a local level to understand the key issues of each country that we operate in and make sure those are integrated into the sustainability plan for our business there. So from a country road perspective, we've seen a really, really quick alignment, and basically within the last couple of months, there's been a shift to looking at our kind of key focus areas, taking on targets under each of those where appropriate, and really, really driving that efficiency across the 4 brands within the Country Road Group already. So we're busy working with kind of targets for 2020 with the Country Road Group, but really great buy-in already from them. Our financial services business, again, had an established scorecard for the last 6 years already. They've kind of upweighted and recommitted to some new targets across the business as well, put structures in place to try and manage that integration as well from a sustainability committee perspective, re-looked as well as at what their contribution can be around the operational side of energy, water and waste. Also their CSI programs and how they can align better. And then I think just looked at what are the kind of key customer interaction points. And they've converted about 60% of their customer base out of paper to mobile and e-statements over the last 2 or 3 years. So very different kind of technology enablement that's happened in that space. From an Africa perspective, again, a new kind of scorecard put in place. We've rolled out a lot of our kind of technology and green store models now into the African operations as well, starting in Mauritius, Botswana, Namibia and Mozambique, and kind of pushing up through the rest of our teams as well. And then also looking at opportunities from both a product and an intervention perspective. So Zambia is trialing a recycling partnership program at the moment for customers as well. We're seeing reusable bags going to some of our countries as well. And then finally re-looking at the kind of CSI interventions that we can play across the business also. Last step for us is really David Jones. And I think what's been exciting is to see that there's a really good foundation to build upon. There's a supply code of conduct in place that they also assess across their entire supply chain with third-party auditors. We've seen good focuses around greenhouse gas emissions, particularly because they also report into a national scheme in Australia that requires energy, water and waste interventions to be collated and reported to the government as well. Packaging as well from a national level, looking at their performance as well and their charity interventions. And I think it's really been a good conversation, easy conversation to now look at a group approach with this foundation in place. So if we kind of pull all of that together, I think really the key kind of focuses for us have been to try and keep building this business case and making sure that even though I think a lot of people want to do this because it's the right thing to do, we can have a conversation with any part of our business or any external stakeholder and highlight an issue of importance, we hope, to them as well. Whether it is preservation of scarce resources like energy, fuel, water, etc., whether it be around the brand differentiation that we're trying to look at, and the customer research we do that does actually point out this kind of level of support as well. The cost saving and operational efficiency. I think the risk management and the kind of long-term positioning that we are taking around future kind of supply chain management as well and future risks there. The product innovation, and I think that's really been most exciting in some cases for us, is just giving people space to think out of their kind of boxes and out of their daily lives within a good business journey or sustainability space. There's been amazing, interesting processes and products that come out from all over our business as well. In our people survey, our community and environmental support are the highest scoring indicator across that entire survey of about 80 different issues. So really a point of pride for our business and one that we continue to develop and that we need to create more opportunities for employees to engage with as well, which is what they're telling us on a daily basis. And then I think excitingly, of course, why they're having this conversation is the growing commitment from the institutional investment space, from the asset managers and analysts, and more questions about what we're doing around long-term risk management, whether it be HIV, AIDS, energy, kind of future food supply chain risk, etc. I think what's made a lot of this possible is also our collaboration with a range of key partners, whether it be our own suppliers, our customers, NGOs, etc. And I think to kind of highlight that, I just want to kind of phase in on one particular issue, which is water. So don't worry too much about the stats there, but really to say that our operational water is not the key issue in this broader debate. We are managing it because we need to have that credibility to have the conversations with our own suppliers. So though we're driving water efficiency through a range of measures and we're making good progress, the kind of key water impact is very much in our foods and to a lesser degree our clothing supply chain. Hence, this particular project, one of a number in our food supply chain. And I think what's been interesting about it is kind of from whence it came. So jointly with Marks and Spencer, we did a kind of global water risk analysis of their and our whole food supply chain on a global level. And what came out for M&S is their single biggest risk in their whole global sourcing strategy was the Western Cape. So let's keep that in mind when we think of water issues in South Africa. Huge issue for us, but from a global level, we are a major concern for a number of international retailers. So if we had the conversation around what that means for them. Does it mean that they need to look elsewhere for other kind of food sourcing mechanisms in their fruit and veg supply chain? Or does it mean we need to work with these suppliers and really understand how they're managing the risks and what we can do to support them? Fortunately, it was very much the latter. And what we did, working with the CSR and WWF as well, is go in and find that basically these guys are 3 times more efficient than the global average in water use in terms of the water required for plums, nectarines, peaches, apples, pears, etc., etc. So water risk area, but suppliers are incredibly efficient and incredibly well managed with this key resource. So again, that said to us, don't turn away and look at other sources of supply. What can we do to help support these suppliers and kind of grow their kind of future risk and resilience going forward? So aside from the on-the-farm interventions, which are now have identified another kind of 20% saving opportunity, we really need to look beyond the boundaries of these suppliers and understand the stewardship issues across the whole catchment. And I think it's had some uncomfortable conversations because it's not an area where I guess any corporate plays that easily when you look not only beyond your own boundaries but beyond the boundaries of your own suppliers. But I think it's a reality for us in South Africa and one that we need to push more broadly. So really the key things for us at the moment is working with the catchment management agency in the area to make sure that all of the information that we've worked on can be shared across each of the different members of that and each of the suppliers and kind of farmers in the catchment. Looking as well at how we can invest in making sure that the low income areas there have got proper sewage infrastructure and proper management of water quality issues that don't contaminate the whole water resource then for the farming part of this as well. And then also looking at the kind of alien invasive species and the pressure that that's putting on the whole catchment. So again, kind of a little bit outside our key comfort zone. But as a result, we've invested in alien clearing in kind of 2 parts of the catchment from a Woolworths perspective as well to try and help this whole kind of supply chain to continue to prosper into the future. It's an ongoing project for us and one I think that hopefully will be somewhat of a model for us that we need to start replicating across many kind of key risk areas as well. And I think, again, the kind of key point here is we can't do this on our own. We've had amazing kind of NGO support, technical support, buy-in from farmers and suppliers, work with international retailers, particularly M&S in this particular case. And we need to kind of broaden that out as well in the conversations we're having. Then I think finally, we've been really fortunate, but on the other side of fortunate means you are kind of placing yourself out there on a pedestal and dealing with very uncomfortable accusations, questions, queries on a daily basis as a result of this. So I think that probably the key success for us out of all of this is almost lack of ambivalence. We have people who are either very passionately positive about what we're doing or very angry if we let them down. And I think that's probably a healthy space to be because at least it creates a space for conversation. So a lot of progress made, but a lot of key challenges that we're still trying to deal with across our business. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Can we open the floor for questions? We've got one here.
Hi. Justin, can you tell us 2 questions? What do you do with your surplus food? And then secondly, just on the enterprise development, I think you said there were 53 companies. Can you tell us what they do, whether, outside of Woolworths being their key customer, are they sustainable? Thanks.
Sure. On the surplus food side, when a product hits kind of sell-by date, gets taken off the shelf, our store staff have got an opportunity to buy that at a discounted price. And then what's left after that, we give to a range of charities at a store level. So that 424 million figure that was up there at cost was the donations to charity last year from surplus food. So we've had a whole lot of different kind of technical companies come in and try and look at waste to energy solutions, all of those things. And at the end of the day, we've got almost no kind of food waste to deal with. So it's a good model. It's not the best model because the consistency of what you have on a daily basis to the charities we can't guarantee. But I think it is still an important contribution for us. Sorry, in terms of the second question, from an enterprise development perspective, we've got partners across our kind of food, clothing businesses, first of all, as well as in support services like marketing, HR, etc. I think what's been a kind of key learning for us, particularly in the food space, which is one of the key spaces we've been trying to drive, is around looking at more than one client for the potential partner. So absolutely, a number of our kind of small-scale farming projects supply ourselves as well as kind of franchise spas or pick and pays or whatever in the regions in which they operate. But I think the second key part has also been matching them with the primary supplier so that they can also piggyback off logistics, off the kind of sort of mentorship opportunities that brings from both a producer and from a Woolworths perspective as well. And I think that model's starting to work nicely, and now it's really about branching it out and pushing it a lot harder.
Just a gentle reminder to introduce yourself and let us know what institution you're from before you ask the question.
Hi, Justin. It's Wasim from Lachai Securities. Just a question around, there's been some controversy around your supply chain, and there was that hummingbird issue and the Frankie's issue and so forth. Has that in any way, and the reputational risk around that, compromised your ability to have look-through into your supply chain, to be able to for businesses within your supply chain to open up for you to have a proper oversight into their sustainability performance?
No, I don't think it has. That hasn't really been the impact for us. I think the opportunities we've had to interact and work with our suppliers on sustainability issues has still been really, really strong and flexible. I think the challenge with issues like you've mentioned is that they kind of one after the other, they start eroding customer trust. So whether they're true or accurate or not, it keeps raising questions. So kind of the next time something comes about, you sort of, as a customer, you kind of cast your mind back and think, but there was something else a little while ago. So I think that's the bigger kind of reputational impact and why it's quite difficult to sort of deal with each of those issues. Because even if we disagree with the principle that's at heart, if we kind of take on a small business and say, actually, you're lying or you're wrong, that's never going to be looking good or well received from a customer perspective. So it's quite a difficult space for us. And I think one that it makes our kind of reputational space very difficult to manage and makes me glad I'm not in corporate comms on a daily basis.
Hi, Ross from MSCI. I just want to get some idea on your plans for Australia. I know you've already highlighted some synergies and environmental management similar over there. Some supply chain kind of tracking is similar, but there it's a whole different ballgame. And retail there is very tough, and there are different issues. So what have you found? In particular, I'm interested in competition from internet-based retail challenging your sustainability.
Sure. I think first of all, just to kind of remind everybody that the Australian business is very much a textiles focus at the moment. The complexity of foods is really kind of doesn't allow for that at the moment within the Australian context. So in the clothing space, I think there's two things that have helped us. Probably the management team, both within Woolworths and within kind of Country Road now, David Jones, has a range of experience within the Australian space. I see you obviously managed Country Road prior to taking over Woolworths as well. So I think the understanding and the experience within the Australian market is hopefully going to make this a more successful kind of intervention than for many other retailers who have had tried to play in that quite difficult market. I think also the opportunity we have from a sourcing perspective, both kind of across David Jones, Country Road and Woolworths clothing, it creates a totally different scale to start having conversations with suppliers about what are the new opportunities and interventions we can put in place there. Obviously, I think as many people are aware, the kind of expensive nature of the Australian kind of cost of living space and the textile space is also a really interesting one. And I mean, we've seen where we sell a quality of jeans at 350 Rand. The equivalent private label there in Australia is 900 Rand. So the margin opportunity we have taking some of our own products into Australia, I think, is a totally different scenario, which hopefully was one we're going to really drive quite hard. But then I think also we at the moment, I think Country Road Group has got about 8% of its sales through internet-based sales at the moment and growing quite quickly. So as much as there's competition from international retailers, the local retailers in Australia are also growing their internet businesses really quickly. We've also heard a little bit of, I don't know if it's rumours at this stage, but that there might be changes in regulations around that, because at the moment the kind of internet-based sales for international retailers are at a significant discount. And that might change and actually kind of even out the field quite dramatically in Australia over the next couple of years.
Hi, Justin.
Hi.
Homoto Soralo from Umfononal Asset Managers. I have two questions. One relates to unions. You've mentioned that your employees have casually been talking out of unions. I would like to hear your views towards unions, and if there is any agreement you currently have with the unions. The second one is, there's a lot that you have covered here in terms of ESG, and you're quite doing a lot. I'm just trying to get my head around how you're making sure that all of this remains relevant all the time, if you have any measures around that.
Sure. I think second question first. I made a slight joke earlier about prioritization and how we keep expanding instead of kind of contracting. But I think that that's the reality for us, is that we are so diversified and we've got such strong stakeholder expectations that almost any single issue in the ESG space, people want us to be on top of. So it's not easy to keep track of all of that, definitely. Maybe it diffuses our focus sometimes. But I think it's just unfortunately reality for us, and a reality that's not likely to change for the next couple of years. So hopefully with our kind of integration around the sort of targets and the measurement around each of the different targets we've set, the 200 plus, it at least means that we've got a pretty clear picture at all times about how we're doing and where the kind of key issues are, key challenges as well. Then I think from a union perspective, our supply chain part of our business is unionized, absolutely. And we've got a good relationship with the union there. We haven't had kind of any unrest or kind of strike days, to my knowledge, in the last 3 or 4 years at all. If you kind of contrast our staff at a store level to other kind of food retailers, though, our union levels are very, very low, almost non-existent. And I can't give you all of the reasons why that's decreased over the last few years, but I think our HR team is really, really kind of keeps pushing the fact that we're trying to create a very strong employee value proposition that's got a whole range of issues around benefits, around bonuses, around training and development, etc., that as an individual creates real opportunities for an employee at that space. So we continue to engage with the unions on kind of any key changes and on any of our future strategies. And I think we've got a fairly good relationship, but they don't currently form a representative union within our store space.
Any further questions?
No.
Is there one last one? Okay.
Thanks. Zavari Rastamji from ZRNA. I'm struck by the extent to which you apply social responsibility to your supply chain. And I'm just wondering, in comparison to some of the other presentations, is this raising the bar? Are we likely to see social responsibility expectations for, say, mining companies, healthcare suppliers, being necessary for them to intervene in their supply chain as well? Perhaps that's not fair to direct it specifically to you, but could you comment?
I think the reality is, for almost any industry, obviously your supply chain is a key part of your competitiveness. So working with suppliers to drive efficiency and look at ESG opportunities is going to be important. The reality for us as a business, so if we want to continue selling, say, food as an example, best we really work with our suppliers to make sure that there's enough water, enough land, etc., to produce that food that we're selling. Same issue in the textile space. If we want to continue selling T-shirts, let's make sure that we've got happy, kind of properly employed workers who have real future opportunities for themselves within the business rather than being exploited. So I think that the nature of kind of food and beverages and textiles is that dependence on a functional supply chain. And that probably pushes us a little bit further than kind of most other industries around this issue. But I think the management of risk and reputational risk as well with supply chains is only growing for all sectors. Last one, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Tladi Malete from Lehaya Securities. 2 questions. One is based on the wellness side of things. It's a broad question. Well, if retailers are concerned mostly in particular about customers' health and wellness, why can't retailers produce healthy food at levels of economics of scales that can be able to reduce prices and all of that? The second one will be in terms of social aspect of ESG, to say that you said that you're not quite sure that the level 3 will be maintained going forward, particularly next year with the new codes that are presented. What are the mechanisms that have been put in place to ensure that a particular or preferential level will be accommodated by Woolworths?
Sure. I think from a health and wellness side, first of all, we've had to kind of re-upweight that whole area quite quickly again. It was something that we really positioned our foods business around for many years. I think the economies of scale are starting to come across there, particularly in kind of fresh fruit and vegetables, some of the protein space, etc. I think also, creating good kind of relationships with people like Discovery Vitality is helping to change that opportunity of access. And I know it's in a very particular target market, but we've seen a really, really quick growth in terms of customer uptake around the Discovery Vitality program. And that's giving people kind of discounts for healthy food choices immediately. So in a way, that's part of the approach to try and create access as well at affordable prices. I think the key kind of issue for us and challenge as well is how we kind of replicate that within our own employee base as well, make more accessible kind of health choices as well. And again, we've kind of partnered with Momentum in that space. And then I think, second question, sure. B level, sorry, yes. I think the kind of 2 key challenges for us is what are we going to do from an ownership perspective going forward with the kind of ending of our current BE scheme in 2015. So we need to factor that into our kind of long-term decision making and kind of tracking. And then I think as much as we're impacted by the new codes, each of our suppliers, obviously across the depth and breadth of our business, is also impacted. So that's going to really dramatically change our enterprise development, supply development, and pref-proc kind of scores. And we've got a whole project in place that's busy kind of recalculating that, engaging with suppliers around what the new opportunities might be. But I think that at a first take, we will definitely be dropping a couple of levels unless we get kind of immediate support and immediate buy-in from some of our key suppliers.